welcome to the Going for Two podcast. My name is Cole Weinstein.
And my name is David Adams. And before we start the show, we would just like to give a quick shout out to our friends at Fan Knowledge Sports. They've been really good to us. They're a cool bunch of writers. And if you're looking for articles written by fans just like you, and you just want to chill on the site and interact with the authors, then come on over. It's fanknowledgesports.blogger.com.
And there'll be a link in the description below, definitely.
Okay, alright. So let's just start going into our topics. What are we going to talk about today, Cole?
We got a lot of free agency we want to talk about. That's really the main thing is free agency. It's been obviously a hectic time in free agency, and a lot of things have been going on. But first, just want to give our condolences to the family and friends in the Baltimore Ravens as their teammate, or as one of their team members, Trey Walker, was killed in a motorcycle accident. Really sad news. He was brought to the hospital. He was in critical condition for a while, and he ended up passing away this earlier today. And it's really sad for everyone in the NFL, and it sucks to see something like that. He was a pretty talented player, taken in the fourth round, played 8 games last year, and he looked like he was improving and like he could have been a solid player in this league. And it's always sad to see someone pass away like that.
Rest in peace, buddy.
Yeah, 23 years old. It's always sad, but. On a brighter note, let's go into free agency.
Well, it's not a brighter note for some teams that are cool.
Yeah, I guess so. Some teams have...
like the Cleveland Browns. I mean, they lost a number of players. Deshaun
Gibson,
yeah, that's how
Alex Mack.
The J always screws me up. Alex Mack at the center position.
Travis Benjamin.
They cut Dwayne Bowe after a very
disappointing season.
Very disappointing season for a seasoned veteran. They overall didn't really sign anyone of importance, and they lost a lot of people. And there were multiple articles coming out saying that they might have the worst talented team in the NFL right now. What do you think about that?
In the NFL right now, yes, I would agree. But of all time, because I've heard that argument too.
The Aints?
There's no way. Obviously, you have the Aints. You have the 0-16 Lions. That team was painfully bad.
But again, we don't know how good this team is going to be because they haven't played a single game. They could blow us out of the water. Not that it's very likely, but they could go 16-0 next season.
It's very true.
We don't know yet.
Well, and here's my thing is that if you draft I don't think any of the quarterbacks would make a huge enough impact for them. But
even Wentz?
No, not in his first year. We talked about this last episode a bit. I think Wentz could be good later on, but I don't feel like personally he has, he's not Andrew Luck where in his first NFL season he can turn a team around. But with Josh McCown, I feel like he is a really good short-term answer. I know that's been...
Was there any news that did they re-sign him?
I think he's still under contract. I could be wrong on that, but I think he's still under contract, and
we'll have our lowly assistant look that up real quick.
He played well last year. Obviously, it didn't translate to wins, but that Cleveland team is not very talented. But he played well, and if he hadn't been benched for Johnny, I think because that messed with his psychosis, I think if he had a more stable situation where he could have just been trusted to throw and make plays like Kirk Cousins was this year, because Kirk Cousins had his best season without the threat of RG3 starting for him.
They did re-sign him, by the way.
Okay, they did re-sign him. Yeah, I think that he's good, and I think we talked about this a little bit last week, and I don't want to get into it again, but if you draft a Wentz or you draft a Goff, I guess if you were to draft a player like a Wentz or a Goff, they could sit behind Josh McCown for a year. Josh McCown could make some plays. They could win some games. Obviously, no one's expecting Cleveland to be good next year. They're expecting them to make plays.
I'd be surprised.
Honestly, a 6-game season I think would be considered a success for them because I think they're in a really bad situation. I don't think free agency's helped. That being said, they brought Paul DePodesta, I believe is his name, from the Mets. He was the Moneyball guy, and he's turned around a lot of teams in Major League Baseball. Obviously, NFL is a completely different system, and he's got his doubters.
You have to see if it works yet.
Yeah.
But it's not off to a great start, letting all those people go.
But that was Oakland's philosophy too. Back when obviously, back in the day when he went to Oakland, they turned that team around. They let a lot of guys go who everyone thought was great. The Oakland A's. So
not an NFL team.
Yeah,
I think baseball is more of an individual sport than it is a team sport.
I would agree with that.
For an offense or a defense to work, you need everyone to play in their specific positions well. You don't need a superstar helps, but it's more of a team sport than baseball is.
Yeah, I would agree with that. All I'm saying is I think you gotta still give him a chance. That being said, you gotta have some talent to win games, even if you overpay some of them. But
the only player I think they should start Joe Thomas at every position next year. I think he'd be a great addition at quarterback.
I feel bad for Joe Thomas, honestly, because I feel like he's a talented player who hasn't had the chances that he probably deserves, and he's been with Cleveland since I want to say 2007. Hasn't ever been to the playoffs with them. He's had a losing record with them. Speaking of good offensive linemen, how do you feel about Alex Mack? Obviously, he left Cleveland. He went to Atlanta. What do you think about Atlanta's overall free agency, and what do you think about that Alex Mack signing?
I think the Alex Mack signing was a very good signing for the Falcons because they showed up a position that they haven't really had stability at in the recent years. I think it's going to provide some push up front and protection for Matt Ryan, and they have a couple running backs in there like Devonta Freeman, and I think that an improved offensive line will give the running backs a chance to show.
Okay, I get that. I agree with that. And I think, personally, I know I'm different than a lot of people on this. I don't really love the Alex Mack signing. I think that he's past his prime. I think since he broke his leg a couple years back, he really hasn't been the same player. And they paid him left tackle money to play at the center position. The center position is obviously important, but you're talking about a guy who's past his prime, who has a leg injury that's really been hindering his play. And honestly, I think that he is. I just don't know. I don't know if he'll work out. I think he'll be good for the first couple years, but they signed him to a big contract, and a contract that I think later on they'll end up regretting because they owe him a lot of money. Anyone else that you want to talk about? One of the Falcons? Anyone else?
Let's switch teams
real
quick here. Let's switch teams to the Houston Texans having a very busy offseason. What do you think about their signings? Obviously, a lot on the offensive side.
Yeah, definitely. I think overall it's a signing that will help to improve this team. I think.
Which signing is that, by the way? We didn't say it.
I think the signings of guys like Brock Osweiler. I think the signings of guys like Lamar Miller.
Didn't think they overpaid Brock Osweiler just like a little bit?
Oh, I think that they definitely did. But in this league, you have to overpay for a quarterback, and it's not like Brock Osweiler is the best quarterback in the league. Or I don't even think he's that close. I think he is in the lower echelon of potential franchise guys, but he's still a stable quarterback. And he had some success on a Denver team that was really talented. And that Houston team's not that far off. Obviously, that defense is not as good as Denver's, but the team...
It could be very good if everyone played to their potential on that defense. They definitely could be as talented as the Denver Broncos. Well, that's kind of a reach because the Broncos had like an all-time great defense last year. But they still can have a really, really good defense, maybe top 5, top 3 defense.
Oh, they were top 5 last year, and I think if they can just continue to get better. I also think if you put Brock Osweiler in a situation where he has a running game with Lamar Miller, that's not a horrible offensive line. He can throw the ball deep to DeAndre Hopkins, and that's one thing that he can do. He has a pretty good arm to throw the ball deep. And he has Bill O'Brien, a quarterback guru, who can help him through all this as a head coach and will call plays to help him as a quarterback. So I think they're not going to ask him to do a lot. And Houston could be a dangerous team next year.
Do you think they're a playoff team next year? And how far do you think they go in the playoffs next year?
I think they're anywhere from... I think they are a wild card team. I think the Colts come back and win that division next year. I think Andrew Luck comes back to where he is because he's the best quarterback in that division, one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I think the Houston Texans...
No love for Blake Bortles over there?
I think Blake Bortles is good, and I also think the Jaguars are going to step up next year, and we can talk about that next. I think they're a wild card team. I think that they probably lose in the wild card game like they did last year. I think they have a better record than 9-7 last year. I think they're a 10, maybe 11-win team, but
I
probably
think they could be a
10-win
12-win
team.
team next year if they actually if their offense steps up, and if Brock Osweiler plays like the quarterback that he can be, rather than the quarterback that he is right now.
Okay, I definitely see that. You want to switch over to the Jaguars?
Sure. Let's switch over to our dear friends in Jacksonville. They have a lot. They signed what's his name, Wolf.
No, Malik Jackson. Same team, same defensive line, different player.
Right.
Yeah. He's
either way, they're both great additions to the team, and they're gonna shore up the middle for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think they still need a little bit more work, and I still think they're 1 or 2 years away from going to the playoffs, especially since those two teams in their division, the Texans and the
Colts,
are really starting to step into their own. I think they're still a couple years off, but I think that they took a step in the right direction this offseason.
I would agree with that, and here's why I would even put them in the mix of those teams. I think they're going to improve massively next year. Obviously, you had that really prolific offense with Bortles and those two wide receivers, Allen Robinson and I'm blanking
about Marquise Lee.
Marquise Lee, and I'm blanking on the other guy right now. It'll come back to me. But that was a really solid offense with a solid running game in TJ Yeldon, and they added a guy like Chris Ivory, and TJ Yeldon, Chris Ivory can be a really solid 1-2 punch that can help shore up that running game. Obviously, you have Bortles in that passing game, and now you have a defense that can at least keep them in games. Because the problem was that while that offense was playing good and scoring a lot of points, the defense would allow even more points. And I understand they're paying a lot of money for guys who will probably underperform at that price, but when you have as much cap space as the Jaguars, it's going to go to waste if you don't spend it. So why don't you overpay for really talented guys like Malik Jackson and like Tashawn Gibson, who can at least improve your defense, and a Prince Anukamara, who can improve your defense and at least make your defense better. They also have that first-round pick from last year, Dante Fowler, coming back. I think that Jacksonville could be an interesting sleeper team because they got a lot of young talent.
So, just like the Texans, I'm going to ask you to predict their season. Of course, we still have the draft coming up, so this is not a final prediction. But how do you think how do they do in the terms of their division next year?
I would say they are a 7-win team next year. I think they got a lot of good pieces. I think Bortles is going to continue to evolve. The one thing that interests me about him to really see where he's going to end up on that quarterback sort of scale is what his turnover number is last year. Because he's had 35 picks in the last 2 years, which I'm pretty sure is leading in the NFL. He had 18 interceptions last year in his second year, which is supposed to be the year as a quarterback when you throw less picks and become more aware. I want to see how his turnovers are next year.
He also threw a high volume of passes, though.
I would definitely agree with that.
I mean, that 18 interception, yeah, it's bad, but if he threw as many passes as, say, I don't know, like an Alex Smith, who did throw less passes and had a low interception rate.
But he also threw for less touchdowns, so obviously you gotta pick your poison. And the thing about Blake Bortles is it's like, yes, he did throw a lot of interceptions, but he also threw a lot of touchdowns. He threw
second most in touchdowns, I think.
Yeah, that's correct. Tied for second with Eli Manning and Cam Newton at 35, one behind Brady. So it's pretty impressive. He's done a lot, and I think he will improve a little bit. I think he will never be an elite quarterback, but
I like blasphemy over here.
I like his potential.
I think Bortles is going to be a top 5 quarterback in the league one day, and I think you're going to be surprised about how much he improves. I think he's going to lead the next generation along with Derek Carr, and that is my segue into talking about the Oakland Raiders and what they did in free agency. What do you think about their moves, and how did they improve this offseason?
I thought that their moves were good. Like a lot of the teams with high cap space, you gotta overpay these players a bit because it's you have the money and it will go to waste if you don't pay for these guys. So they brought in some solid talent. They brought in Sean Smith, who I think can be a really good cornerback for them.
They really addressed their issues. Unlike some teams this offseason, they really got into bringing in guys that can help their overall team and address those positions that they weren't very good on. They bring in an offensive lineman. They bring in a cornerback
and pass rusher.
Yeah, and I think those are the areas that they struggled with because they haven't had an elite pass rusher opposite Khalil Mack for some time. And I think taking the pressure off Khalil Mack and giving him time to work and build off of his Pro Bowl season last year is really going to benefit their defense.
Definitely, I would agree with that. Obviously, signing Kalichi Osemele, big contract. Definitely, he was overpaid, but once again, that was
they had
a lot of money.
$90 million in cap space or something like that.
Yeah, I want to say it was something around the 60 range, but
it was insane about how much money they had to spend. And if you're gonna overpay guys who are gonna really help your team, and that's what he did.
Mm-hmm. I will agree. The one thing I will say, though, is they signed Bruce Irvin to replace sort of the Aldon Smith role because Aldon Smith didn't really have the production that they were hoping for last year when they signed him on that flyer one-year deal. But my thing about Bruce Irvin is I believe they're paying him $9 million a year for a situational pass rusher. At least to me, that's not worth it. You were paying $9 million a year to a guy who doesn't even play on every down.
No, I think Bruce Irvin's going to start, though.
But he's not a 3-down player, is my point, and I fundamentally
split time with Malcolm Smith. I think they got over there.
Yeah, they did from Seattle, another Seattle guy.
And I get your point. $9 million is a lot of money to play him, but they can also move him around. He's a multi-positional player. He can play outside linebacker, and he can play a little middle linebacker position. So I think it was a great pickup for them, and I don't really have a problem with the $9 million tag that they put on him because that's not a real big deal because they needed him.
I would agree with that, and he's definitely going to help take the ease off of Khalil Mack. You can't double team Khalil Mack because you have Irvin on the other side. But fundamentally, I would rather pay for a guy maybe who's not as great of a pass rusher, but who is a 3-down player who can play.
Like who? But who would you sign that's like that in this class? I mean, not this class, but this free agency market.
Yeah, definitely. I guess I would agree with that. He's probably the most talented linebacker from that class. So I guess I would agree with that. But
and again, the cap space was really inflated this year, and just to get money out so they don't waste it. I think it was a good move by them. And again, we knew going into this offseason that players that weren't worth big money were going to get big money because how much of teams had to spend and the cap space increasing every year due to new contracts made by the NFL. So you knew a lot of players were going to get overpaid. And at least he's not getting $13 million a year.
Yeah, I know. I would agree with that. And it's not a ridiculous number for a guy who is definitely very talented. I think it's a little too much. I guess to go back to it, the Raiders, I believe, run a 4-3. So personally, I would have rather overpaid for an Olivier Vernon, a guy who.
Yeah, but are you gonna overpay Olivier Vernon from the money he already got? He got a huge contract, and I don't know the specific numbers, but there's no way the Raiders were gonna offer him more than that.
Olivier and Malik Jackson actually are the two highest paid defensive ends in the league.
You don't want to pay him. You don't want to pay Vernon that much when you can get there's in the coming years they're gonna eventually have to offer Derek Carr, Amari Cooper. They're gonna have
Khalil Mack.
Yeah, they're gonna have to offer their young star players a lot of money because they've been playing to that potential. And you can't go out and sign a Vernon for how much was it? Do you have the numbers?
I want to say it was $17 million a year. Give me a second, I will check on that.
Yeah, that's quarterback money. You can't drop that much money when you got those 3 huge contracts coming up.
I guess that's true. And Bruce Irvin, you did get for $9 million. So I guess of the guys who were in sort of that price range, they paid a decent price for him. And he definitely seems like a guy who wants to be in Oakland. He came out and said that the reason why he wanted to go to Oakland and took less money elsewhere was because of Ken Norton Jr., who's that defensive coordinator there, who was the linebackers coach in Seattle.
And also at USC. What?
Yeah, and he was a really he's become a really talented coach, was a really good player. And
And don't forget that they got Chuck Del Rio, who's really a player's coach
and a defensive coach.
Yeah, I think he played a role in getting Irvin over there.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Speaking of Olivier Vernon, how do you feel about this massive Giant spending spree that they had, spending $204 million total, obviously, not for a one-year payroll, but throughout the lives of 4 guys' contracts: Damon Harrison, Janoris Jenkins, re-signing JPP for a year, and paying Olivier Vernon. How do you feel about all that?
The JPP signing was obviously a steal. Of course, he's not going to be the same player with that unfortunate July 4th fireworks accident, but he's still going to be a decent pass rusher. And he had the most slotted passes over, I think, the final games of the season. So the JP signing was a steal. The others, not so much. They grossly overpaid for most of their defensive talent they signed this offseason. But you got to remember, their defense last year was historically bad.
Well, they were one of the worst defenses in the league. They were third to last in sacks. They had 23 sacks. To put that into reference for you, after the Broncos were before the Broncos were done with their bye week, they had already reached 24 sacks. They played Cleveland, I want to say it was week 6 or week 7. They had already reached 24 sacks. The Giants got 23 all season. They needed to add to their pass rush. And
also their overall defense wasn't just their pass rush. Like their secondary gave up huge numbers. Their running game gave up huge numbers. I think they had the 32nd overall defense in the league, even behind the Saints.
Passing-wise, they were the worst. I know that for sure.
Yeah, they desperately needed help, and I think that they went into this offseason with a mentality that says, okay, Eli Manning, he's
not getting any younger.
He's not getting any younger, and you got him in the best situation on offense with Odell Beckham Jr., who's obviously a stud, and you need to make sure the defense pulls their weight. Eli Manning had an incredible season last year, not in terms of interceptions, but he was up there in the TD totals. I think we mentioned this earlier in the show. He was tied for second, and they desperately need a defense to at least keep him in games and get him to a chance where he can pull out the victories. And I think they did that, but going down the line, I think that's going to be a real problem. Especially, again, like the Raiders, you're going to have to sign Odell Beckham Jr. to a huge contract down the road. And they just locked up, I think, 3 years where they're going to have very minimal cap space to work with.
They still actually don't have, they still have a fair amount. They have about, I want to say, $16 million in cap left, so it's not horrible. They were fourth or third highest in cap space.
They have $16 million?
Yeah, they still have a fair amount of cap left. So I don't hate these signings. I personally, at least the Damon Harrison signing, we can talk about the others later. The Olivier Vernon signing, I think, was a little rich, but I really like Damon Harrison. He was the reason why that Jets defense was so successful last year, because Harrison, nicknamed Snacks, clogged up the middle and was able to help pass rushers get to the quarterback, corners cover. He helped that Jets defense so much. And by moving over to the Giants, still in the same city, he's going to be able to do the same thing. Obviously, people have criticized that it's going to be tough for him to move from a 3-4 to a 4-3. But I'd argue that he is in the same frame as a guy like a Marcel Darius. And Marcel Darius has succeeded in 4-3 in a 4-3 before. He can play that similar role, and he can still stop the run and clog up the middle. Like you were saying with the JPP signing, I really like that. Basically, when you do the math, they franchise tagged him because it was a 1-year deal. They basically franchise tagged him at a $5 million discount.
Yeah.
So he gets another show me contract, and you get to see if JPP can come back to what he was.
I think he still can play. The talent is obviously there. Of course, he's not going to have the same explosiveness, missing a couple of fingers, but he'll still be a quality player.
What I said, I think I said this on the last show, is that it's just his hand that was injured. It's still the same.
Hands are a big deal,
obviously, but it's like it's still the same motor. It's still the same athletic guy. Like he's still physically a dominant guy. He's obviously got to work with that hand thing. But I saw a story that he can now. He has movement in his fingers, something that doctors said that he'd never have. He's improving and he's getting better. And I think
that's more than Peyton Manning can say.
I think he's gonna get better and get better, and I think that will prove to be a good signing, and the Giants have shown faithfulness in him, and I think he's going to reward that with a long-term deal if he's successful.
What do you think about the Jets letting a player like Damian Harrison go? Because, of course, I think they do have the players to replace him, but none of the players are going to do what he did the past couple of years. What do you think they're going to do in terms of that? Which players are they going to play where?
I think that this first address, I think they wanted to keep him. But they couldn't because the Jets were one of the lower teams in cap space. They were bottom 5, I believe. They had around $6 million left with cap, and obviously they still have to work on re-signing a guy like a Ryan Fitzpatrick, who that's a whole other issue that we can talk about in a little bit.
Do you know who signed Cromartie?
Cromartie, I don't believe Cromartie has been signed by anyone yet.
He hasn't? Okay.
Yeah, and obviously they signed Forte. I'm not really sure who they're going to replace on that D line. Obviously, I know.
Well, I think Leonard Williams is going to have to step into a bigger role. Sheldon Richardson, of course, is going to start, but
and you got Muhammad Wilkerson.
Yeah,
but the problem there is those are 3 defensive ends.
No, but I think that Leonard Williams can make the switch to defensive tackle. He played some at USC.
But in a 4-3, not a 3-4.
Right, but what else are they going to do, you know?
I think personally, of those 3 guys, because I think they're all really talented, I would probably put Sheldon Richardson in the middle, just because he's shown he's more of a power guy, and he's, I think, the biggest of the 3. I think he would work best at D-tackle. I think Muhammad Wilkerson and Leonard Williams, who are both really talented.
I really think that Williams has the technique and skill to thrive as a nose tackle.
But he's 291 pounds. Obviously, that's still a very large human being, but he's not in that 300-pound range, which is normally expected of a guy who can and is expected, or of a guy who's supposed to play defensive tackle in a 3-4, because you're literally the anchor of that team. Whereas in a guy like Damon Harrison was a lot larger. I'm looking up his size right now. He was 350 pounds, which is quite literally almost 60 pounds heavier than Leonard Williams. Like, that's a large difference.
Right.
So I agree with you as far as they have the talent there. I'm just not sure who could. I don't think Leonard could step in. I think that would impede on his play, because I think he's a talented guy who can succeed as a 3-4 defensive end.
Okay. So we'll move on to different teams. What team do you think was... Who do you think had a solid offseason? Not a spectacular one, but really improved upon their team coming out of free agency?
I think personally I would look at a team like the Chargers, a team that wasn't that great last year, but I think a team that had some really solid signings. Obviously, they burned those bridges with Eric Weddle, one of their best players, and that's a really odd situation. I'm not really sure what happened there, and he came out in the Ravens press conferences saying things like, the Chargers are dead to me, how tough it was last year because he felt like they weren't appreciative of him. But the Chargers, obviously, the Eric Weddle thing, and losing a guy like Ladarius Green, who was a young up-and-coming tight end to the Steelers, those are 2 tough losses, which is why I don't think they had a great offseason. But I felt like, signing a guy like a Travis Benjamin who can be a solid number 2.
They brought back Antonio Gates, too, which is... He's one of the best tight ends, even at his age, still in...
He had 5 touchdowns last year.
Yeah, in the NFL. So, of course, the money he's getting
I'd argue he's a little overpaid.
Yeah, he's getting money for the things he has done over the things that he will do. But I think he's earned it, and I think he's still a really solid player at the tight end position.
And him and Rivers, they have chemistry. They're great together. They have I believe it's the record for, I think by far, for the most touchdown passes from a quarterback to a tight end.
Ooh, are you sure?
I'm 99% sure. It's like in the 70s. I think the next closest was...
Because I would think it's Romo to Witten.
I don't believe so. I think that's up there. I think the next one actually was Fouts to Kellen Winslow. I could be wrong on that, but I think that is correct. I think another great signing, though, by the Chargers, and one that really went under the radar, was the signing of Casey Hayward, the cornerback, originally the cornerback for the Green Bay Packers. He's getting paid about $5 million a year, which isn't a lot of money, and I think that that's a value signing for the Chargers. He can fit in with Jason Verrett, and he can help out that secondary. And I think that the Chargers had a couple other good signings, guys like a Brandon Maybain or a Dwight Lowry. Lowry is going to probably end up replacing Weddle. And it was not a great signing, but it was a bunch of under-the-radar guys who will work for fairly cheap, and guys who can make a difference as players for the Chargers. So I think the Chargers had a solid offseason, and personally I think they were better than where they left off last year.
Okay, yeah, you're right. They do have the most touchdown passes, but Romo to Witten has the most completions.
Okay, that would make sense, because Witten is one of the few tight ends and one of the few players ever with over 1,000 receptions, so that'd make a lot of sense. Anyone else who you felt like had a solid free agency? Or just a free agency that you liked?
Can we switch gears to a free agency that they didn't really do much, but the one move they did make wasn't so great?
Sure.
Let's talk about the Saints for a little bit.
Are we talking about Kobe Fleener?
We're talking about Kobe Fleener. And he's getting, I think, $7 million a year.
That sounds right. I'm going to look that up.
I think he's getting more than Antonio Gates is. And why? I don't understand. Saints, what are you doing? You let Ben Watson go for $3 million, but you can't. But you bring in a tight end who who didn't even break 800 receiving yards last year for like 1 or 2 touchdowns for $7 million.
He was the number 2 there to Dwayne Allen. Who, to be fair, Dwayne Allen
$7 million
per year. It was a 5-year, $36 million contract, so it's over 7.
Oh God! I mean, why? I don't understand. I just want to know why. Because Ben Watson was of course he was getting up there in age, but he was coming off his most productive season.
491 yards and 3 touchdowns. Obviously, I think those numbers will improve with a quarterback like Drew Brees, because that's an offense where the tight end is built to thrive, very similar to the Chargers, where it's an offense where the quarterback is relying on the tight end a lot. So, once again, Ben Watson had a really good season last year, but I argue being on that Saints offense makes him better statistically, because he's just in a situation where he's going to get more throws and more targets. So I think Fleener's going to be good, but not $7 million good. 4 or 5 million maybe.
They could have shored up their defense with that kind of money. Like, they could have spent it on guys who could really make an impact.
2 more million, you could have gotten Bruce Irvin.
Yeah, like, and I think we had around $9 million to spend because we signed like 2 more guys, but I didn't really like the signing. I think he'll be a good player in New Orleans, but I don't think he's worth $7 million a year. I don't really think there is like mid to lower range tight end worth $7 million a year.
As far as average per year rankings go, he's the 12th. Antonio Gates is the 14th, just for reference. So, not as high as I had originally thought. Dwayne Allen, his counterpart, who the Colts Society keeps a little higher at 10. But that's still...
The Saints did not need to spend $7 million on a tight end.
Yeah, I would most definitely agree with that. That's, in my opinion, is one of the lesser free agency signings. To throw it around a little bit,
let's talk about the Broncos.
Sure, definitely. But
Because they're another loser, I think. Would you agree with me on that?
I would definitely argue they're a loser.
They lost their future franchise quarterback,
Brock Osweiler,
which was a
and replaced him with Mark Sanchez.
right. They replaced him with butt fumble.
Yeah.
So I think they really downgraded at the position, and he came out saying that he was ruffled, I guess was the word, for being benched at the end of the season, which I think is a little haughty, I think is the right word, or a little conceited a little bit, because, yeah, you were benched for Peyton Manning. Like, it's not like you were benched for some third-string guy. You played well, but then it was his last playoffs. It was his last game when they replaced you. Why would you complain about that? I just don't get it.
Well, as far as the Brock Osweiler leaving, I completely understand that. I think obviously he was frustrated by being benched for Peyton Manning, and the Broncos didn't offer him as much money, and he wanted to follow the money.
I think they offered something like what, 15
It was $15 million a year.
I mean, that's not too far off, and you are getting a chance to play with Demaryius Thomas. You're getting a chance to play with some other. Oh God, what's his name? He used to be
Emmanuel Sanders. Yeah.
Yeah, Emmanuel Sanders. You got a really good.
But I'd argue DeAndre Hopkins is just as good, if not better, than both those guys.
Who was their second?
I think that is an issue that they have, but they're going to address that in the draft. My point is that I think comparing the two, I would argue they're fairly equal because Denver is kind of getting gutted as far as their defense goes.
I wouldn't go as far as saying gutted. They have guys who can step up, and plus they have the draft.
Can you replace Trevathan? Can you replace Brandon Marshall? Can you replace Malik Jackson? Like, these are all really talented players who all left. All guys who are the best on their teams, or like one of the best on their teams, and some of the best in the league. All really, really talented guys. I'm not sure that you can replace that production. I don't think that they're going to have a year like that. I think, like a lot of teams, they're really going to have a Super Bowl hangover and struggle. And I think that wasn't the best position for Brock. Just to be honest, I think Houston's in a lot better of a position. I think Denver's losing a lot of players. I think they're going to have some cap issues later on because John Elway kind of mortgaged that team's future so they could be in a very much win-now situation with Peyton Manning, and it paid off. They did win a Super Bowl, but I think they might suffer from that a little bit more.
We still have the draft coming up, so he can address some of those issues. But I do agree with you. They're going to be less talented than last year, especially on the defensive side. But I think they can replace those players. Not obviously as talented, but they'll still be a pretty good defense. You bring back Von Miller, you bring back DeMarcus Ware, you bring back I think all of the secondary. I think there's still going to be a formidable defense. Where they're going to struggle is on the offensive side, and since they lost that talent on defense, it's going to really show. But I don't think they're going to be a bad team. I think they go 8-8, 9-7.
Yeah, and the one good sign that they did have was Seahawks tackle Russell Okung. Still a talented tackle. He's had a couple off years in a row, but he can come back to that Pro Bowl form that he was few years back, and they signed an interesting deal where Okung actually has no guaranteed money, and it's like a 1-year deal, but there's like a 4-year option. So it's a really interesting contract, and I think it's going to be one that works out well for them.
He acted as his own agent, right?
Yeah, he did,
That's
which
the
is
one?
odd.
Yeah. Well, I mean, go him.
Yeah. And he said he got the deal he wanted, so.
Yeah, okay, whatever. I guess he made enough money in Seattle where he's like, oh well.
And
Who cares?
I think the way the deal works is it's very, it's not heavy on early. He doesn't get a lot of money early. But if he stays with the Broncos for the 3, 4, 5 years of the 5-year contract, he gets more of that money because while none of it's guaranteed, he's going to get paid large amounts in non-guaranteed money towards the end of that contract. And I think that'll work out for him and the Broncos because the Broncos have some cap struggles early on right now for the next couple years. I also think he's going to help shore up that offensive line that was a really big issue last year for the Broncos, and another reason why Peyton Manning and at times Brock Osweiler struggled because they didn't have great protection. Sort of going off that, Obviously, the Broncos, they have quarterback issues. There's a lot of teams that do, and there's sort of this odd quarterback
What are you
carousel.
talking about? They have Mark Sanchez, man, Pro Bowler.
Yeah,
He's been to the AFC Championship 2 times.
yeah, he's a solid game manager. But there's this interesting quarterback carousel that's happening, and nothing's really happened yet. But I'm curious to get your take on it. Sort of, there's who are the Broncos going to get, who are the 49ers going to end up getting, who are the Jets end up getting, and there's a couple other teams in the play there. There's the Rams, and
Well, let's start with the Jets. They re-signed Fitzpatrick.
they haven't yet. I don't believe.
They haven't, but they're going to.
You think so? They're pretty far apart.
Yeah, but Fitzpatrick's gonna realize like no one's gonna give me the money I want because he's how old? He's
He's an older guy, but
early 30s, mid 30s, I think.
yeah, and I don't think he's worth the money that he's asking for. He wants to get
Yeah,
Brock Osweiler money.
no
but
one in the NFL who's looking for a quarterback wants to commit to him long term. So he's going to realize that, and I think that's why the Jets played it really well. He's going to re-sign with the Jets for the money they want to give him, maybe a little above.
they want to give him Chase Daniel money. I don't know if he wants to take that though.
Well, else is he going to sign? If he signs anywhere else, he's going to take Michael Vick money. So you've got to you've got to cut your losses at some point.
I don't know exactly where he would go, but I think what would be a good situation for him is Denver. I think you saw him.
He's not going. They're not going to go to Denver. They just got off having an older quarterback, and Fitzpatrick's not as good as Manning. They want
he was better than Manning last year.
Okay, but like,
and I'm talking about last year.
We're talking about over. They signed Peyton Manning while he was in his mid-30s from the Indianapolis Colts, and I don't think they want to do that again. I think they want a younger guy like a Kaepernick or an RG3 to come over and help them with their quarterback situation.
But what the Broncos need right now is, to a degree, kind of like a Mark Sanchez in a way that a game manager. Obviously, Mark Sanchez turns the ball over way too
Mark
much.
Sanchez.
But Fitzpatrick does a better job of that, and actually, I think Fitzpatrick he's a more grounded player because obviously you have Kaepernick.
They're not going to give him the money, okay? They're not going to give the money Fitz is asking for, especially since when they have Mark Sanchez, who's not as talented as Fitzpatrick, but they still gave up a later round pick for him, and I think that's their backup plan if they strike out with guys like Kaepernick or RG3, and they already got a backup. They don't need Fitzpatrick to come over. Their first priority is going to be signing either RG3 or Kaepernick. And if they can't get any or those two guys, they're going to turn to a later round draft. They're going to sit them, have Mark Sanchez start, which he's effectively acting like a Band-Aid, which Sanchez does not well, but he can act as a Band-Aid. And then they're going to wait for that guy to mature and maybe start a year from now.
Okay. I guess of those quarterbacks, who would you like the most? This is you, and what team do you think that they would fit best with? Of those Kaepernicks, the RG3s, the Fitzpatricks, those sort of guys who are still around there.
Who do I like the most?
Who do you like the most, and what do you think would be their best position? Like the best position for them?
I like Fitzpatrick and Kaepernick. I don't like RG3 as much. I think he might go to the Broncos, but the two quarterbacks I actually really like are Fitzpatrick and Kaepernick. Fitzpatrick obviously older, but he can still sling the ball around, and I think his best situation is staying right where he is with the New York Jets. He's got Brandon Marshall coming into his own. Brandon Marshall just came off like a career season, I believe, and they really develop a connection with Brandon Marshall coming out and saying he hopes Fitzpatrick stays because they've developed such a deep connection over just the course of 1 year. Kaepernick, again, stay with your team. You've got Chip Kelly coming in who says he's a huge fan of Kaepernick, who just came out and said that. And You go into his offense, it's kind of like the offense you ran at Nevada, and I think you're going to be really successful there. Don't leave just because you're a diva. Stay with your team, work out the rest of your massive contract, and then if it doesn't work out, leave then. But I think you at least owe it to yourself to give this Chip Kelly thing a try.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I think all three of those quarterbacks that we talked about are all feasible options. I think I differ from you because of those three, RG3 is my favorite. I think Fitzpatrick's the safest option. I think he would be best for, like I said before, a team like the Broncos where they're more relying on a consistent guy, whereas in RG3 and Kaepernick are a bit more of like they're a little more
Explosive playmakers.
and they're a little bit more risky. They can have big highs, they can have these great seasons, but they can also have low lows. Whereas in Fitzpatrick has proven consistently that if he is put on a team with talent, he'll at least be serviceable.
Yeah, and I think that's where the Jets have talent, and I
Mm.
think that's where he should be. He thrives in a good running game, and with the Broncos, I don't really see them having a good running game
Well,
next year.
CJ Anderson is coming back. I
But
believe
he hasn't
Hillman's.
been that consistent. He really came on at the end of last year in the playoffs, but during the year he wasn't that consistent.
I think that's also though because him and Hillman split carries, so their yards were less. But I think they were both solid running backs. I get what you're saying though. Obviously, the Jets have Forte and they re-signed Bilal Powell, and I believe they signed one other guy, so they have an interesting stable there of running backs. Sort of to go back to RG3, I really like him because I think he is extremely talented, like Kaepernick, but I think he's learned a lot from sort of the issues he had when he was Washington. I think when he was in Washington, I think he's matured a lot. I think part of that was he was in a really weird situation with not a super well run organization in the Redskins. I think they've certainly had their issues, and that team kind of fell apart, like as far as their like team chemistry. And he was definitely a part of that, but I don't think that was all his fault. I think honestly he would be really good in St. Louis, or not St. Louis, L.A. now with the Rams. They just moved from St. Louis.
You don't think the Rams are gonna go pick a younger quarterback out of the draft?
Um, I think if a Goff or a Wentz falls to them, I think they would.
I think Paxton Lynch would be very interesting in LA.
I would definitely agree with that. I think Paxton Lynch would be interesting too. Once again, there's always the debate of whether or not Paxton would fall, but obviously I think he would be there when the Rams could take him. I think he could be interesting. I think it would take a little bit of time, but I think when you get RG3, if you can sign him, they got a good brain trust there with Jeff Fisher. I feel like it's a more stable situation. RG3 can succeed with a good running game that he was so good with when he was in his rookie year with Alfred Morris running for, I think, the second most in yards behind Marshawn Lynch that year. And they had a great running game, and he can do that with Todd Gurley and kind of recreate what he had in Washington his rookie year in St. Louis. And then the Rams with that 15th overall pick can take a
But
more
can
talented
he
player.
though? Can he?
I think in the right
Ever
situation,
since that knee injury, he hasn't been the same quarterback.
I would
Like
agree
it
with that.
hasn't been just the players around him. He hasn't played well, and that's why he was sitting the bench most of last year. It wasn't that.
I think that was also an attitude issue, though, and I think he's learned from
It
that.
was both. It was an
I would agree.
attitude because if he was playing lights out football, an attitude issue, teams would be like, who cares?
I get that.
Because a lot of good quarterbacks have attitude issues. But anyway, it was his play that eventually doomed him to the bench. Do you think he can really go back to his? Um, I think it was all rookie season.
Yeah, he was
He
rookie of
had
the year, and at that point, people were more believing in him than Russell Wilson and Andrew Luck. People believed that a lot of people believed that RG3 was the best of
but
those
that's
three
beginning
quarterbacks.
to look like a fluke now.
I would agree with that, and I'll rephrase it. I obviously don't think he can recreate those numbers, and he can recreate that season because I don't think very similar to Kaepernick. I think he was a bit of a flash in the pan as far as that's the highest he might ever be. But I think he can certainly get closer. I think he can turn into a serviceable quarterback because he has an arm. If he can learn to pass in the pocket, which I think he can work on, he has the arm. He can make most throws. He can still run around. He can still have a good running game in Todd Gurley. Rely on Todd Gurley most of the time. That'll take a lot of pressure off of him. And I
But in
think they
his
can make a good situation for him in St. Louis,
I
where it'll
think
be
his
stable.
rookie year in Washington, correct me on this if I'm wrong, but
Sure.
they had a lot more offensive weapons than the LA Rams do right now. Because, of course, they do have Todd Gurley, which is going to be better than Alfred Morris, because Todd Gurley is just an absolute beast. But as far as wide receivers go, if my memory serves me correctly, they had Pierre Garcon, they had Deshaun Jackson, they had a couple really good wide receivers while RG3 was like in his prime. They had a good offensive line too, and the LA Rams don't have that kind of offensive firepower.
Um, I would agree to that for the most part. I definitely don't think as far as wide receiver, I think they struggle a little bit more. I don't think though that they had all those guys. They did have Pierre Garcon. Don't believe they had Deshaun Jackson back then in 2012.
Oh yeah, you're right. He came over from the Eagles, right?
Yeah, but they had
They
Santana
had
Moss who was okay
Yeah,
back
they
then.
had. That's who I was thinking of. Santana Moss. That was my
Yeah.
bad. But yeah, they still had a better wide receiving core than the Rams do now.
Yeah, I would agree
Because
with that.
who's their leading wide receiver? Kenny Britt? Like,
Yeah, that's a good point. But I think instead of drafting a Paxton Lynch, with the 15th overall pick, they could sign RG3 and then they could get a Laquan Treadwell, a Corey Coleman, a Michael Thomas, Josh Doxson, depending on your flavor, or they can trade back and they could get maybe more like a guy who's a Josh Doxson who's projected to go early second, late first, because 15 is a bit too rich for him. But I feel like without the need of a quarterback that's so dire, they can make more play. They can get better players in the draft. They don't have to reach. They can trade back,
and
and they can put
again,
more talent around RG3.
like, okay, let's be honest here. Do you think RG3 is gonna be better than like a Case Keenum or a?
Yes, I do.
You do?
I do.
Because if they sign him to a relatively big contract just to shore up their QB position, and he doesn't do well, which he might
Yeah, it could
well
happen.
do. I mean, I would rather have Case Keenum draft a quarterback and wait for him to develop than go for an RG3.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that, and that makes sense. I just think RG3 works well for them, and I think also this is a weird thing to say, but it is underrated. It's you want LA's new team to have an identity. They're moving to LA. This isn't St. Louis anymore. You kind of want a big name at quarterback.
Oh yeah, we keep calling him St. Louis, but they're the
Yeah.
LA Rams now,
Yeah,
huh?
well, it's like St. Louis is LA is this big city of stars, and Case Keenum and LA don't really fit together. No offense to Case Keenum, he's had his moments, but he's not a star in this league, and I personally don't believe he ever will be. I
Well,
think
Fitzpatrick's not a New York type of guy either.
he's not a. I don't know. I wouldn't see him as a Giants quarterback, but the Jets have always sort of been the second team there, and it's not like they've just moved. Like I understand if you're in the in between quarterbacks, you sign a guy, but just moving to LA, you kind of need to make a splash and to have you know a bigger name player to represent LA and to be the identity of LA. And I think RG3 can bring that. And I don't know. I really like his upside. Do you want to move over and talk about Kaepernick? 'Cause I know you're a lot higher on him than I
Yeah,
am.
I'm a lot higher on Kaepernick because
Why do you think he's different than RG3?
I think it's that he's more proven than RG3 is because Kaepernick had 2-3 years where he performed well, didn't he? And I think that just a bad year or two after your coach leaves and he gets replaced by a joke like Tim Tomsula, like
Jim Tom Sewell.
exactly my point, Cole. And just because he struggled a little bit and he was feeling upset for Jim Harbaugh leaving, I don't think that's an indicator that he's going to rapidly decline. And I also think that Chip Kelly's system is going to be good for him because uh, Chip Kelly's system turned Nick Foles into a Pro Bowl quarterback, and Kaepernick has a lot more talent than Nick Foles did. So I'm thinking that if he stays in San Francisco, he's going to be a great quarterback.
Here's my thing about Kaepernick, and to answer what you said, it was 2 seasons that he had that were solid, and then he's had 2 that weren't that great. What I feel like about Kaepernick is I don't trust his judgment all the time. I don't think he is a very aware quarterback. He's in this situation where Chip Kelly, one of the smartest guys and one of the best quarterbacks for his situation. I'm not saying Kelly's one of the best coaches because I think he's not in the NFL. I think he's still got a lot to prove. But Kaepernick doesn't want to be there. He's like, oh, I want to go to the Jets. He wants to move cross country.
But Kelly wants him to be there.
He said he's interested in the Browns. Like he's interested. Like I don't think he knows what he wants, and I don't think judgment-wise he's good enough because I think that matters a lot as an NFL quarterback. I think you have to sort of have your head on your shoulders.
Yeah, I think you need to have judgment to play quarterback
and I don't think he has that off the field all the time. I think sometimes he can be kind of showboaty, kind of cocky. I remember there was that issue a couple of years back when he wore that Dolphins hat, and everyone gave him backlash, and he was like, "I can wear whatever hat I want." When it doesn't.
He can't.
You're on your team, a team with a bunch of fans who love and support you, and you wear a hat for another team. It's kind of disrespectful.
Oh, come on. It's not that big of a deal.
Small things like that are big deals, though.
No, they're not. No, they're not. No, they're not.
Well, then how come after that his play is declined?
You're like the only one who remembers that. Like, I completely forgot about that whole quote-unquote scandal. Like, that wasn't a big deal.
Well, then how come since then his play has declined? I'm being serious. Are
you actually drawing parallels between Kaepernick's incident wearing a Miami hat and his play on the field?
No, what I am saying though is I'm saying it's all a part of it. I'm saying it shows he doesn't have the best judgment. And as you said before, being a quarterback, you need to have judgment.
One day he was like, I'm going to wear that Miami Dolphins cap. And then from there, it was just straight down. Like, okay. And now, there's no parallel there. Like, what are you even talking about?
Well, all I'll say is that was the summer in between 2014 and 2013 season. And 2014 was his first bad year. That was his first year where he struggled.
With Jim Harbaugh having major issues with management.
He had issues with management that whole time, though.
No, but that year it really escalated. Like, it got to a pretty icy tension between him and Trent Bulk and Jim York?
Jed York.
Jed York. Jed. So, yeah, like, I don't think that no one's focus was really on that game that year. And when Jim Harbaugh left in kind of an unceremonial way, that was the only head coach he ever knew. And he really grew close with Jim Harbaugh, and they did so much together. And when he just
I'd argue 2 years, it wasn't a lot together. A lot of quarterbacks have...
A lot. Back-to-back NFC championship games is a lot. And going to the Super Bowl one year, I think.
Well, the first year wasn't back-to-back. The first NFC championship year was with, I'm blanking on his name now, was with Alex Smith. And then the next one was Kaepernick. Then after that, it wasn't. What I'm saying is, though, there's a lot of situations that all add up to show that this guy does not have the best judgment. And that shows on the field. Am I saying that the hat situation
he still has the talent. He has the decision-making ability to succeed. He just needs a stability at head coach. He needs guys who believe in him. He needs a guy who wasn't, I'm assuming, a lumberjack for his first job before coming to coach the 49ers. And I think he'll get that with Chip Kelly. And he still has a lot of talent. I think more talent than RG3 has at this moment. And I think he has better decision-making skills than...
I completely disagree with the decision-making skills.
Oh, what gives you that impression?
I would argue that RG3, his issue is he's got some arrogance, and I agree that's something he needs to work on. I think he has worked on that a bit, but I think I think that's still there. Obviously, I think he's got to work on that. But Kaepernick, first off, that hat is complete and total arrogance, and
That's
he's
a complete and total arrogance.
okay. When a team is paying you millions of dollars to play for them and be their brand, why would you say that you're a fan of some other team and show off that you're a fan of another
He
team?
didn't say he was a fan of another team. He
Then
would just.
what is showing taking a picture with another team's hat say? What does that say to you?
That
What
doesn't
message?
say anything
What
to
message
me.
does that send?
What message? It doesn't send any message. He's just wearing a freaking hat. It doesn't send any message to me at all. Like he can wear any hat he wants. Like that's not a big deal for me.
It's not a big deal that the
And
leader.
I just want to I'm just going to
Sure, sure.
so RG3 the last couple years last 2 years had 12 interceptions and 6 interceptions versus. Do you have Kaepernick's stats pulled out?
I do. Kaepernick in 9 games threw 5 interceptions. In 16 games threw 10, and then in 16 threw 8.
So you're gonna sit back. I think Kaepernick's way far along than RG3 is. I think RG3's confidence
But-
has been sincerely been diminished
In-
by what
Until
happened
last
in
year,
Washington.
the Niners. Obviously, last year was different, but the year before that, the year he had 10 interceptions, and the year he had 8 when he played 16 games, he had far more talent on that team than RG3 had in Washington. The Niners were a talented team. Obviously, they had that max exodus with all those guys retiring before the 2015
So you're
season.
saying that it was talent that made RG3 throw 16 touchdowns to 12 interceptions that year?
Well, also, Kaepernick threw. Oh, okay. What I'm saying is,
And
is
4
that
touchdowns and 6 interceptions the next year.
Well, you're also not looking at the fact that he didn't play all 16 games.
Still, that he got benched for those numbers, dude. Like, of course he didn't play all 6 years, but whenever you have 4 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, that's not good.
So
Is
you're
it?
saying if you've played 2 games, you threw 4 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. That's not great. But my point is that when you play a full 16 games, the touchdown numbers, you can't compare them because he's had more chances to throw touchdown passes.
He was on the track. If the
RG3
numbers were
played-
right, in 2 games he throws 6 interceptions. He was on track to throw what?
Well, it wasn't 2, it was 7, but yes.
Yeah, he was on track to throw over 18 interceptions that year.
I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but he played 13 and then 7 in those 2 years that you were talking about, and that's less. So you can't compare the touchdown numbers because he didn't play as many games as Kaepernick. He didn't get as many chances. And what I'm also arguing is that when you have better receivers, when you have a better line, when you have a better defense, you're inclined to play better. That's just what it is. And when you have
just compare last season. Even if you took 7,
last season
games
RG3 didn't play, so I can't really compare the two.
Okay, for even 2 years ago, they had a mass exodus, and he still played admirably. He wasn't the worst quarterback ever, but I think the upset fans in San Francisco are a little bit more uptight about that than the fans in Washington.
I don't know if that's the issue. I asked Kaepernick threw for under 60 completion percentage, and he had bad decision making.
So did RG3.
I
I
would
think that
agree.
can be fixed. I don't
But
think that.
Kaepernick's goes off the field. I think RG3 is arrogant off the field. I don't think he is naive off the
When
field.
does Kaepernick? You're citing a hat incident
I'm citing
from
other things, too.
3 years ago.
I'm citing the fact that when Chip Kelly is welcoming him with open arms, and it's a good situation for him, he wants to go to Cleveland instead. I'm sorry, that's not the best judgment.
Well, okay, listen. Off the field, he wanted to put yourself in his shoes for a second. You've had going to be 3 coaches over the last 3 years. You're going to have Chip Kelly, you had Jim Tom Sula, and you've had Jim Harbaugh, who you loved, and then management said, "Oh, we don't like him," even though he led us back to back NFC Championship games, and treated like the most important member of those teams that went back to back was replaceable.
Since their last two, in the time that they've both been rookies, Kaepernick's been in the league 1 year longer. They've had the same amount of head coaches, 2.
Well, he's gonna have 3.
Okay, yes, but I'm talking about the playing time
And
they've had.
then
They've had the same
Jim
amount.
Tom Sula, like, okay, you hired some nobody, and now he's trying to get comfortable with him. But not, you know what? He's out too.
But so your argument is he's upset about having 3 quarterbacks, is having a third coach, so he wants to go and find a new coach anyway. So
He wants to go to where there's gonna be stability, and in Cleveland,
there's stability.
They have Hugh Jackson, and like Cleveland Browns fans are not going to expect a playoff team from them this season and probably next season.
They're not in San Francisco. No one's expecting a playoff team in San Francisco.
San Francisco fans are.
They're not.
Every year, 49ers fans expect their team to compete at the highest level because they have a tradition of winning there. It's not like in Cleveland where the last championship you won was with the UFL or whatever back in the 50s and 60s. We're talking about a franchise that has won 5 Super Bowls. Like, this is a city that wants its team to consistently put off playoff teams on a regular basis because they've established, much like New England in Boston, they've established a culture of winning, and I think that's going to be very important for Cap in his decision.
Okay, I would agree with that, and I think very much that San Francisco does have these high expectations. I think they are going to be lower this year because it has been back-to-back seasons of struggling, but I certainly see where you're coming from as far as the fan situation. I think overall, Kaepernick, of course, he has the talent. And I think, who knows, maybe he stays with Chip Kelly. He gets his head back on his shoulders and he figures it out. But I just think that there's a better chance that he doesn't. I see where you're coming from. And that's why I think I like RG3 better personally because RG3.
Hey, Cole.
Yes.
You know who else has a lot of talent that teams could use? But these top free agents still left. Cole, you want to tell us more about them?
Yeah, definitely. So obviously there's a lot of guys still out there. It's only been a weekend of free agency. A lot of good guys who have been unsigned. Speaking of RG3, his running back Alfred Morris, I think, is really talented. Still has a lot of carries left in him, and was a good player last year until Jay Gruden did this weird thing benching him for Matt Jones and really just ruined his confidence. Like it was overall a bad season. And I really think Alfred Morris can be really successful. A couple other guys who I really like, Steven Wisniewski. He was the second center behind Alex Mack. Center's a really important position, and he's been a really solid player, a good pass protector, and a solid run blocker, and someone who I really think could also make a difference on an offensive line for not as expensive of a price as an Alex Mack. There's Patrick Robinson. He was ranked really high amongst cornerbacks. He didn't have as many situations where he was able to cover because he wasn't the big starter in San Diego. But same thing. He's a value pick that would be really nice. Nick Fairley had a nice year in St. Louis, and I think he can really get back. I think he has a shot to get back to form at not a horrible price. I like a lot of these guys. Another guy who I really like is Dwight Freeney. I think Dwight Freeney still provides a lot of value, and a lot of teams didn't really want him, which surprised me. And he proved everyone wrong when Bruce Arians in Arizona took a chance on him. And I just really feel like another team should take a chance.
Isn't he really old though?
Yeah, I think he is, but I still think
Grandpa Freeney.
He signed for next to nothing, and he had a game-winning strip sack against, I want to say, Minnesota. That was a huge win for the Cardinals. Like, what do you think? Is there any free agents that you like? Any of them that I talked about that you like specifically?
I love Dwight Freeney. like Dwight Freeney could add a big value on any team that he goes to, and you're right. A team is gonna sign him for next to nothing because Freeney wants to come back, but there's questions about his age, about his health, so he's gonna sign for next to nothing, and I think that really matters for him after a long career of earning a lot of money.
Yeah, definitely. I think he wants to win one more Super Bowl. Hopefully, re-sign with Arizona, team that he likes.
I actually think he might want to go to a different team.
Uh, yeah, okay. I definitely I see that maybe they'd offer him more money. I don't know. Like it's I think at
Like
this point it's really
I know a team that could offer him more than the bare minimum he's getting with that basic team over in Arizona.
Oh,
So
really? What would that team be? I'm actually super curious. Like, what team do you
the
feel
New
like
Orleans Saints.
that actually makes a lot of sense? They were a team that really struggled in defense last year, struggled to get to the pass rusher. Who's that linebacker who they got out of Washington who's really talented?
Kikaha.
Yeah, Kikaha was a really good
I'm
sack
not
player.
sure that's how you pronounce his name, but
Yeah.
it's how it's spelled.
And if you add him with Freeney could be a mentor to him. I think that would work out. And obviously, New Orleans is a team with not a lot of cap space, and I think that if you brought Dwight Freeney in, he'd play for cheap, and he'd be a real value pick to the Saints. I think he's a good player. A couple other guys who I like, Arian Foster. I think Reggie Nelson still got some talent in him. He's a little older. Jari Evans, speaking of the Saints. And lastly, another guy who I think would provide good value as a remaining free agent at a reasonable price is a guy like Rashad Johnson, someone who was part of a really talented Cardinals secondary. Speaking of Dwight Freeney, another Cardinals defensive player. And I think that, he was obviously probably the weakest part of that talented secondary, but he's still a talented player who can provide, at the very least, backup help to any team. And I think he's a solid starting strong safety in this league, and I think he could provide a lot of good value. Well, I think that's both of our takes. It's been a lot of fun today, but I think it's going to be about time to wrap up the show. It's been a lot of fun. As always, check the description below. We're going to leave our Twitter, our email if you want to email us something that you want us to talk about. Link below is going to be to Fan Lodge. Make sure to check them out. They've been really great to us. They're housing our podcast on their website. We both write for them. And overall, it's a lot of fun there. Fan Lodge is great. We want to really start building them up. So definitely make sure to check them out. Check everything in the link in the description below. Drop a like on this video. Comment if you agree with us, disagree with us, anything. Make sure to subscribe and have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much.